The goal of prayer is to transform oneself. The goal of prayer is not to change the will of God, since God cannot be subject to change. Instead, the goal is to be uplifted by the changes that happen to one during prayer, so that one will be in line with the will of God. While it is true that the person praying speaks to God as a ruling king who can be convinced, or a father who is open to change, or a righteous man who would give charity due to the request of a poor person, this is just a tool, so that when the one who is praying yearns to elevate oneself to the divine, one naturally and already has become one with God's will. Regardless of the act of attaining that which the person praying requested, prayer is in and of itself a powerful tool in perfecting an individual. The manifestation of the request is simply a result of that transformation. Therefore, each person praying should understand that the act of prayer is a miraculous law of nature that God created in His world for the purpose of bringing His creatures to every type of perfection. It must be made clear, prayer is not something that influences God, heaven forbid. Does prayer change the person or God? A person who thinks that prayer changes God's will is blaspheming, while a person who thinks that prayer only changes oneself undermines the worth of prayer and all types of religious acts. However, a person who believes that by changing oneself one changes the world, since all of existence is influenced by the transformation of one of its elements, this understanding of prayer will bring blessing to one's soul and the entire world. A world of optimism. Prayer is an absolute necessity for oneself and for the entire world. The waves of the soul rush back and forth, demanding from both oneself and from the entire world a type of perfection that the limited world simply cannot provide. As a consequence, one finds oneself left with a constant feeling of sadness. It is a frustration that may even cause one to lose one's mind. However, before it is too late and this cancer is allowed to spread inside, we begin to pray. We pour out our words and are elevated to a world of ultimate perfection. When doing this, our own inner world visits this perfected world. We become filled with a peace of mind. At last, the inner force that affects the universe, of which one's inner self is an element, transforms the world to a place of optimism. Light in a dark world. Prayer challenges the soul to actualize its purpose. When many days and years have passed by without a powerful prayer, stones gather up within the heart. One begins to feel a heaviness of spirit. However, when the wind of good spirit returns and the gift of prayer is given from above, those stumbling blocks are removed. As the soul experiences a state of elevation during prayer, one's past becomes healed. Of course, this will not happen all at once. Instead, one starts to grow and the light of prayer guides one and reveals one's own path. Inner transformation changes the world. When one's spiritual consciousness is transformed and a new divine insight begins to shine in one's soul, the external world takes on a new form. It is like the creation of a great artist. The world is new and full of beauty, with all of the negativities of one's old world passing and fading away. This new reality isn't simply a subjective experience. Rather, the more truth contains in this transformation, the more it really does transform and beautify the world. Prayer reveals the unconscious self. prayer takes the hidden part of one's soul and actualizes it. The effect of prayer, when it rises up from the depths of the unconscious self, will depend on the extent of the purity of one's inner world. Self-transformation through spoken words. Saying words out loud has a powerful effect on one's life. When a word is spoken, great light emerges with it. The deeper one pierces into the words of prayer, the greater the power of light that they will bring, and the more influence they will have to create change. The clearer the expression, the clearer the light, and the more focused its effect. The words become reality, and it is impossible that prayer will have no results. The energy of a word. Every word spoken opens a channel to the soul in accordance with its value. Therefore, each word of Torah, wisdom and morality opens a doorway to the outpouring of holiness. The waves of the soul are constantly being moved through the tremendous power of speech. On the other hand, an empty word, and all the more so a negative and hurtful word, opens an impure channel to the soul. Many waves of mud and dirt pour through, until eventually a spirit of goodness returns and cleanses it. Any word that is drawn from a person's inner desire for holiness, even when it appears to be in simple conversation, is really sourced in the inner essence of a person's will. Therefore, when people have a deep vision, every conversation that comes from their spirit opens up channels of goodness. As it is written, the simple conversations of Talmidei Chachamim must be studied. Sukkot 21b. In fact, some of these are equal to the entire Torah. Transforming the world via speech. When one's soul is elevated, one begins to feel the incredible power of speech. Such a person truly understands the significance of every spoken word, of every prayer and blessing, of every teaching and conversation. This person perceives the great importance of all forms of speech and senses how the development of the world and all of its changes are a result of speech. The spiritual power of screaming. The sparks of holiness that dwell in the depths of negativity are what cause a person to scream out, so that the entire body experiences it. Now, as long as one is sensitive to the holy sparks within, one's actions and speech will be calm and respectable. However, if one needs to suddenly raise up these sparks of holiness from the bitter depths, then screaming out loud is very helpful. There are righteous people who cry out loud to God due to the sufferings and general tragedies of the world. This type of cry will continue until the world is filled with perfection and light. The cries of these righteous people do not come from their inner spiritual distress, but rather from the great sufferings of the world, the sufferings of the divine presence, which screams like a mother giving birth. And just as a small piece of wood is able to set fire to a large piece, so too a small scream is able to cause a great spiritual and intellectual awakening. A yearning fire, a divine thirst burns inside one's soul, but it needs an external force to draw it out into the world. And sometimes, with just a tiny action, something powerful is produced. What should one pray for? When one requests something in prayer, one must be careful that one's intention is to remove evil and darkness from the world and to strengthen divine good and light. In fact, when one's request is motivated by this intention, not only do one's own mistakes become corrected, but also all mistakes and faults are in some way improved. What we seek is an all-encompassing perfection. To pray for oneself or for others. Rabbi Yossi said in the name of Rabbi Hanina, prayer was established by the Avot, Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi said, prayer was founded in place of these sacrifices. Berachot 26b. True service of God is when a person perfects oneself, when one connects to God with all of one's heart and soul. It is nevertheless true that the purpose of self-perfection is to eventually improve the Jewish people, and finally to fix the world in the kingship of God. Although prayer is connected to the deepest and most personal emotions of the heart, it is mainly built on many national dreams: redemption, a righteous government, the Mashiach, the rebuilding of Jerusalem and the Temple. Therefore, our question is as follows: what was the main reason for the establishment of prayer? Perhaps the outpouring of the soul is the main point, and the national dreams are a mere outgrowth and consequence. On the other hand, perhaps the central goal is national perfection, and the individual soul naturally becomes purified as a result. When the Avot were serving God, there was no Jewish nation in the world. Thus, the main focus was personal growth without any connection to one's people. In contrast, the sacrifices were the service of the nation. Therefore, the opinion that says prayer was established by the Avot challenges us to serve God through the spiritual development of the individual, whereas the opinion that says prayer was founded in place of sacrifices challenges us to serve God through the Jewish people. How should one pray about enemies? Our rabbis taught. Shimon HaPakuli wrote the 18 blessings in their order before Rabban Gamliel in Yavne. Rabban Gamliel said to the sages, "Can anyone among you write the blessings about the evil person?" Shmuel HaKatan came down and wrote it. Berachot 28b. The blessings of our prayers are filled with kindness and love. Any truly wise person is able to write such prayers for a holy and intelligent people. However, a prayer that includes within it matters of hatred and anger must be written specifically by a person whose heart is totally pure and holy, harboring no real hatred. When this person prays to God to destroy evil people, it is because those people are preventing God's greater goal from being actualized. However, if one has even the smallest amount of personal animosity towards evil people, then even if one is initially focused on God, one's emotions will eventually lead one to an increased hatred that is improper and illogical. Therefore, Shmuel HaKatan was the only one who was qualified to write the blessing about evil people. He was the person who always said, "When your enemies fall, do not rejoice." Pirkei Avot 4, Mishnah 19. He removed all the hatred from his heart, and even toward his adversaries. We thus find in his blessing only pure intentions for the actualization of God's greater purpose. How can God reply to prayers of enemies? Perhaps your heart asks you, if many people are praying for their own individual needs, and all the nations are praying for their own successes and victories over their enemies, then how can God listen to everyone when some of these prayers contradict each other? You should answer, prayer is accepted based on how much it is aligned to divine purity and honesty. The more a prayer is filled with righteousness, the more it will have influence. Some prayers actualize half of their desires, some produce a third or a quarter, or even 1%. It all depends on the worth of the prayer in accordance to God's measurements. Preparation for praying. Rabbi Eliezer says, when one makes one prayer keva, one's prayer is not considered sincere. What is keva? Rabbi Yaakov, the son of Idi, said in the name of Rabbi Oshea, a prayer that feels like a burden. Brachot 29b. Before praying, one should feel as if one's soul is weary and exhausted from the burden of worried thoughts that are so distant from perfection. Only through pouring out one's words before one's Creator and Father in heaven is one able to remove from the heart this burden. Through prayer one is given courage, and instead of a worrying spirit, one will be crowned with happiness and the strength and joy of God. However, when one has an incorrect understanding of prayer, it lacks this energy and can itself exhaust a person. Prayer must be motivated by an inner drive emotion and not some external obligation, for then it would necessarily be a prayer that feels like a burden. How depression and laziness affect prayer. Our rabbis taught, one should not pray when feeling depressed or lazy. Prayer comes to awaken the soul's potential to focus on pure thoughts. Yet it also comes to awaken the body's potential to focus on moral actions. Therefore, one must prepare both physically and spiritually in order to achieve from prayer its intended goal. In order not to hold back the soul from its transformation, one must not be in a state of depression, which prevents the soul from ascending to pure and clear thoughts. One must also avoid being in a state of laziness, so that the body is open to being aroused towards moral actions. The inspiration of beauty. Rabbi Eliezer says, when one makes one's prayer keva, one's prayer is not considered sincere. What is keva? Rabbi Yaakov, the son of Idi, said in the name of Rabbi Oshea, a prayer that feels like a burden. The rabbis say, whoever does not say it in the manner of supplication. Rabbah and Rav Yosef both say, whoever is not able to insert something fresh into it. Abaya bar Avin and Rabbi Hanina bar Avin both say, whoever does not pray at the first and last appearance of the sun. For Rabbi Chia bar Abba said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, it is a religious duty to pray with the first and last appearance of the sun. Rabbi Zera further said, what text confirms this? They shall be in awe of you with the sun and before the moon throughout all generations. Tehillim 72 verse 5. Barachot 29b. The world around us should naturally awaken our emotions to pray. One's heart should be awakened to pray shacharit by the wonders of God that can be seen in the rising of the sun. One should be aroused to pray mincha by the wisdom and kindness of God's presence that can be seen during sunset. When a person is inspired to prayer at the very moment that the world itself is changing, one's prayer is not criticized as being keva. One's emotions at this time are no longer focused exclusively on one's own inner world, but instead have expanded to be sensitive to the universe as a whole. One begins to see the divine kindness that fills everything. However, when one disconnects one's emotions from the moments of life that should naturally lead to feelings of inspiration, then one's prayer is called keva. One has become indifferent to the greatest praise of God, the spectacular wonders of the universe. They shall be in awe of you with the sun and before the moon throughout all generations. Tehillim 72 verse 5. What does this verse mean? Through praising and being conscious of the laws of nature, one will arrive at an awareness of God. This is in line with the prophet's words, raise your eyes on high and see who created these things. Yeshayahu 40 verse 26. Thus, Every person with an understanding heart should take opportunities to encounter God through the wondrous universe that is always giving praise to its Creator.